Beterbiev versus Bivol is a loaded pay-per-view from top to bottom. I can remember working some Mayweather cards where the undercards were dull, waiting for a major main event. But boxing at one time had some major pay-per-views in the 90s and 80s where they were stacked with talent. Are we going back to the old school?
Is this a throwback or the entry of a new era? Now we have so much streaming networks out there providing content in so many different ways for entertainment. There's so much competition. I think that boxing actually is stepping up its game.
Godzilla and King Kong in the main event, and the whole damn Jurassic Park in the undercard. Now that is a fight card. Let's keep it up.
Complete cards, X's and O's for a huge light heavyweight showdown. It's all here on Deep Waters as we get started. Welcome to Deep Waters, a huge light heavyweight showdown, a complete card from top to bottom, a pay-per-view worth buying. Are we talking about boxing? Are we in the right place? We are. It's got to be. Jimmy Smith alongside Paulie Malignaggi, Chris Algieri, of course, Teddy Atlas joining us on Zoom. Look, we have a great fight at the top. Right? We have Beterbiev versus Bivol, two destroyers. They are knockout punchers. They have all the physical skills. The lead up to this has been kind of what we've expected, Paulie. A little bit of the Rocky IV, right? Ivan Drago, I Must Break You is about all we're going to hear. But when you talk about the knockout ability of Artur Beterbiev, he talks with his fist. When you talk about Dmitry Bivol, you talk about defense, combinations, slick movement, a real understanding of range. Does Bivol have the skill set to challenge a guy who most people don't even want to get in the ring with? Is that fair?
Yeah, he's got the youth energy, for sure. You know, he's got a style that contrasts Beterbiev's strengths. You know, I think of the guy who gave the most trouble to Beterbiev. I think of Alexander Vostok, and Vostok in his prime was a bit of an in-and-out fighter with good boxing skills. Bivol has some of those similar traits. He's not a lefty, but he's got a lot of very good legs in and out, ability to change range and disguise his entryway. You're going to have to be really tricky, and you're going to have to be on for 3 minutes of every round against a guy like Beterbiev. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, 20-0, 20 knockouts. Chris, when you look at it, you and I saw Beterbiev early in his career, right? We looked at his fights, and the first thing you think is, God, he hits like he stole something from him. Is that enough to overcome this fight? Or does he need, as Paulie mentions, new wrinkles to his game?
Yeah, absolutely. I think early on, a lot of people thought with Beterbiev, yeah, he's a two-fisted destroyer, comes forward, but he gets hit. He got dropped 2 times early in his career. That hasn't been the case. He's about to be 40 years old. He's 39 years old, but he's getting better and better somehow. He's improved this last couple years. He's not getting hit as much. He's controlling guys way better. The technical proficiency that he actually has that is very underrated. A lot of people don't realize how good of a technician he actually is starting to show itself. And in this fight, he's really going to need that.
Yeah, Teddy, when it comes to Bivol and his ability to control range, his ability to work from the outside, stay behind the jab, when you want to make a technician, you look at Bivol and you go, oh, well, you box like that. Flip side of the same question, is that enough against a puncher like Beterbiev? Can it keep him at distance?
Beterbiev is Sonny Liston and John Wick melted together. He's the boogeyman. How do you pronounce that again, Chris?
Baba Yaga.
Bayaga, whatever.
Baba Yaga, yep.
That's him.
Baba Yaga.
He not only imposes his physicality and his skills on you, he imposes his will. So we can talk till the cows come home about how you control range, your quick hands, your box, all the abilities that people have. But the most important thing, he's got to have it up here. And that's why I give Bivol a real good shot, because I believe that he is strong upstairs in the attic, not just downstairs in the basement. He knows what he has to do to keep a guy like this off balance, but you have to have that fortitude to do it, to go through the fire, to go through the rounds late when the guy is imposing himself on you. I believe Bivol is the guy that has the whole package.
When you look at this style matchup, one of the questions I like to ask when it's a real contrast in styles, Paulie, I'm going to ask you, what round are we going to know what kind of fight this is? Not who's going to win, but what kind of fight this is. Who's going to lead the dance? What round do you say that happens?
I think you're going to see it in the first couple of rounds, and here's why. I'll tell you why. Beterbiev, although he's older, the champ Chris just made a great point. You know, he is getting older, but he seems like he's getting better. I'll tell you why. He forces you to burn about 4 times, at about 4 times the rate that he burns energy, because he's cutting you off. He doesn't work very hard. His mental pressure is just as good as his physical pressure. Why? Because he hits so hard. So anytime he's cutting you off and getting in your face, you're more in panic. It's an automatic reaction when a guy hits this hard, and when he's technical and he can disguise his attack. So Bivol is going to be moving around. He's going to be in and out. He's going to be boxing very well. And he's going to be landing some good shots himself. But unless he controls Beterbiev's attempts at winning the position game, at staying in his face and making that mental pressure feel like it's worse than what it is, even though it is as worse as it is, I think that, we're going to realize that right away, whether if Bivol can control that range or if Beterbiev's going to be in his face. If Beterbiev's in his face from the go and Bivol is in panic mode from the go, even if Beterbiev has some early success like Vosdik did, you're going to see his burn rate is going to go too fast. And by the last quarter of the fight, you may have the same problem Vosdik had when he fought Beterbiev.
Chris, you're one of those guys, you understand nutrition, you understand energy conservation. If you are, let's say Bivol calls you, his team calls you tomorrow and says, hey, we want your help. How do you make him, as Paulie said, conserve energy against a hard puncher? Because like I said, that panic does tend to burn a lot of calories.
I wouldn't have to do anything. That's just the way that guy operates.
You would just take their money and
Bivol is cold-blooded, man. Champ, you made a great point. You mentioned positioning. He's a master of positioning. The way that he's able to make those deftly moves in and out, it's incredible the way he does it. He makes you miss just by a little bit, and he steps right in and bangs you with hard shots, whether they're jabs or right hands. And once he finds that rhythm, he lets those hands go in combination. He's again, you mentioned the pressure by Beterbiev. Hey, you know who else fights like that oftentimes? Big guys work harder than that? Canelo. And Bivol had the answer to that. Keep him off position, keep touching him, keep the jab in his face, don't let him get set. He's a puncher, he wants to close the distance, but Bivol has that ability to change range so adeptly that it's very difficult to get any kind of beat on him.
No way, dude. No way. Beterbiev is like Golovkin, not Canelo. Golovkin is in your face like that, making you driving you crazy. Canelo's not active enough. He's not active enough.
Yeah, but he uses his physical pressure on guys, and you see guys crumble.
He does.
Callum Smith, crumble.
He does, but Beterbiev is. You look at the way Golovkin was making guys fold like that. Golovkin was in it because again, his attack is much more diversified, and I feel like Beterbiev also has that. Canelo. I feel like it was more his reputation. He is a big puncher, but it's also his reputation. He's big. The crowd, anything he does, if he goes, the crowd's going crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but also the opponent's wilt.
Yes,
it's not just the crowd, because
yes,
the opponent's wilt.
Yes, of course, because they're believing the hype.
Yeah.
With Beterbiev, bro, and Golovkin was the same way in his prime. He just goes like this to you. Right on your arm, be like, man, all right, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't need this in my life. And you got to figure out a way to convince yourself to stay and fight. And this is great with Bivol, too, though, because Bivol is a master boxer, position himself, but in the opposite way. They're foes for one another. I can't wait for the fight.
But to your point, Jimmy, he doesn't panic. That's the difference. Bivol doesn't panic.
Well, you love this analysis? You love how we break things down? We'll do the same thing at the end of Haney Garcia. Check us out on YouTube post-fight. We'll be talking about it, and we'll be talking about this card when we come back. Welcome back to Deep Water. It's going to be a great one. April 24th live. It's going to be an incredible fight, incredibly well matched. As always, don't miss it. Now, here, we are discussing a light heavyweight showdown. Usually, that's about all we'd have to talk about. But that's right, when it comes to the undercard of Beterbiev versus Bivol, we have an exceptional promoter versus promoter showdown. It is Queensbury taking on Matchroom Boxing. It is team-based. Winners get points. It is an incredible promotion versus promotion showdown. We never ever see that in boxing. Gentlemen, what is your opinion? Not about necessarily the showdown at light heavyweight that we've seen before, but about the card itself. I'll start with you, Teddy. Is this the wave of the future? Is this something you want to see in the future?
Or is it just in Saudi Arabia? I mean, where the money is and where Turkey al-Sheikh right now is the face of boxing. That's the funny thing about it, if you're going to get down to the reality of it. People saying, is Canelo the face of boxing? Is Fury the face of boxing? No, Turkey al-Sheikh right now is the face of boxing because he's making these fights possible. You could put whatever you want with it, but at the end of the day, you got to have a good matchmaker. You have to make the matches that obviously are going to make the people satisfied, that are gonna, spit fire, if you will. And Ray Ford, Nick Ball, I'm just gonna pick one. There's a lot to pick from. It's like being in a candy store here. I'll pick, I'll pick a Hershey bar. I'll pick a Milky Way. I'm gonna take Ray Ford and Nick Ball, featherweight. First of all, I was just I was just over in Saudi Arabia a month ago. Nick Ball just fought a draw for the world title over there against Ray Vargas. Nick Ball is like a guy that we love. We love Isaac Pitbull Cruz. He's a guy that comes at you. He doesn't, he introduces himself not by feeling out, by walking across the ring and throwing a left hook. That is what Nick Ball is all about. He is relentless pressure. He is punch after punch. He's smoking Joe Frazier in a miniature body. And Ray Ford, he just won as dramatic a world title fight as you could win, where he won it literally in the last 25 seconds of the fight when he scored a knockout where he was behind going into the last round. He's from Camden, New Jersey, where Dwight Quarwee came from. That match alone is enough to make a main event. Because again, not only because of the quality of the fighters, but because of the style of the fighters, that the matchmaker understood that and put two styles. Ford is a good puncher. He's a sharpshooter. He can live on the outside. He can look to catch on the way in. He can also go get you. And as I said, Nick Ball only knows one gear, straight ahead. So I'm starting with that. Again, go into the candy store, guys. Pick whatever you want. You got the heavyweights with Dubois, who just proved himself in a tremendous win that he just had against Miller. So either way you go, you're going to get not just names that you're familiar with, but you're going to get styles that are going to make you happy.
Now, is that the breakdown for you, Paulie, when you talk about this, styles that make fans happy? When you talk to fans of other combat sports, one of the things they say about boxing is you basically get one fight. You get a main event, the rest of the card doesn't draw me in. Is this an effort or a good way to get those maybe skeptical combat sports fans?
Yeah, that's what it's been of late. In the past decade or so, the majority of it has been, you get a big main event, and even that a lot of times doesn't even live up to the hype. But you get there hoping the main event lives up to the hype. 3/4 of the time, it wasn't living up to the hype, and the undercard was dull. Guys you didn't hear about because all the main event fighters wanted to take all the money. Well, that's where Turki Al-Rashid comes into play here. There's enough money to spread around the entire card and make a dynamite card. This is why this is such a big deal. This is the card you pay for. You talk about pay-per-view, is it worth paying for? It's on the undercard. It's the only way you can make these kind of matchups is in Saudi Arabia because he's got enough money, there's enough money for Turki Al-Rashid to spread around and supersede the promotional entities that block these fights from happening. There's enough money for the promotional entities to say, you know what, all right, we'll work together. There's enough money. Everybody has a price, like Ted DiBiase used to say. Well, you know what? We're seeing that right now because these guys are fighting cross-promotional fights against one another. When did the Ante Wilder wind up at Matchroom, by the way? Did I miss that one? I saw it on Matchroom there.
He's fighting for Team Matchroom. That's all that matters. Chris, what do you think about this promoter versus promoter, kind of almost team-based boxing? What's your thought on that?
Well, listen, we talked about how competitive the card is, right? Well, guess what? These promoters are competing too. These guys don't want their guys to lose. That's why these fights are good. And that's one point we haven't talked about. Yeah, we're talking about Saudi. Yeah, we're talking about the money. Yeah, we're talking about this idea of bringing two promotions together. But listen, Eddie does not want to lose. These guys don't want to lose.
Such a good point,
They're
man.
setting up their best fighters, guys that they know are going to win. And the rules for this is pretty cool. A win, you get a point. A knockout TKO, you get 2 points. And you have captains of each team. They double the points. So there's strategy to this as well.
You just made me think of something, bro. This is why MMA doesn't do this, bro. As far as they stay in their own promotions. No, the UFC right now is the top dog, right? But it's only because nobody also has seen the other ones fight each other, right? We don't know for sure. We just know, hey, you know what? That's our favorite fighters. But what if the UFC made one fighters fight each other against UFC fighters and PFL fighters? Okay, now we really find out. Well, that's what's happening in boxing now. Boxing promotions, they're allowed to fight one another, but they don't typically like to share because they don't want to come out looking second best. Well, now they don't have money in there. Hey, well, we'll take a chance at being second best.
What makes people gamble, you talked about the risk, Paulie, is when you're playing with someone else's money. How long will it last? That's a question we're going to tackle when we come back. That's right. Another great fight, April 24th. We got a fight now going on between Chris and Paulie right next to me. It seems like every time. But now we have something else for them to battle over, which is when does the spigot get turned off? We discussed it a couple minutes ago. All this is great right now because you have Saudi money flooding in that is bringing promoters together. Paulie, does it last? Is it sustainable? That's the big question. Teddy brought it up.
Here's why I say it's sustainable, because the fights live up to the hype. You know, the fights are fun. You know, when we've had these cards in Saudi Arabia, we've had fun and we've enjoyed them. They're long-lasting, a lot of good fights. You know, Teddy was talking about that Ray Vargas and Nick Ball fight from the last card as well. You know, that wasn't even the main event. That was Ngannou AJ was the main event. So you got top to bottom cards where you're just enjoying the entire show. I think it's sustainable because when the product lives up to the hype, people don't mind paying for it. They want to be satisfied with it. When you start jerking them around, making fools of themselves with mismatches, that people stop paying for your product. These are worthwhile fights. This is a worthwhile product. I don't have to be here selling it, really. I think any boxing fans looks at the matchup, at all these matchups, consistently on all these cards we've been watching so far in Saudi Arabia, and says, you know what? This is what we've needed. We haven't had this in a while in boxing. You know, the UFC always gets a lot of credit for having stacked cards, and boxing wasn't really doing that. Well, now we're starting to see more and more of that, you know, and especially the cross-promotional fights. The only way you're going to get them is if somebody steps in like Turki Al-Sheikh. I'm sorry. That's the only way you're going to get it. You don't ever see it. You rarely see it. And now you're starting to see it more and more.
Chris, with the number of elements that have to come together, that's something people don't really understand, man. And I've been in MMA a long time. There's one boss. They're in charge. They decide what matches get made. Boxing's a lot of different forces that have to come together. Do you see them coming together more because of cards like this, Chris?
Well, yeah, I do, because normally we didn't see those fights because of competition, what we alluded to earlier.
Exactly.
These promoters didn't want to match their guys up and then be seen as second best or third best. So we weren't getting that competitive nature. It wasn't like, oh, I got to prove myself, so we're getting more competitive fights. It went the opposite way. But now, when you have house money, when you have someone who's coming in and is footing the bill, I don't know the financials of what's being done over in Saudi. All I know is that these promoters are all lining up to do it. And they're putting their guys out against each other, and they're taking that risk, just like we were talking about earlier. You know, is this going to last? One can never know. But the Turkey is, the prince is, he is changing the game. He's flipping on his head. He doesn't care if they sell. The Joshua Ngannou fight was on a Friday afternoon. In the U.S., that's not going to sell. That's not a prime time to do it. He doesn't care. He wants to put on the best fights possible, and people will come. Because we live in a world of VOD and you know, the streaming networks, I don't think it matters as much. And as long as he's willing to keep making these competitive fights, I think ultimately it'll last as long as he wants it to. It'll last as long as people are excited about these fights, which they very much are. They may not be tuning in exactly at that time, but listen, we're making history, and I think that's what matters.
So, Teddy, any chance this catches on in the United States? We see U.S. promoters come together, my best versus your best. Do you think it's a model that can work here in the States?
You see any oil wells in the U.S.? I haven't seen any recently.
Not a lot. Southern California. Come on.
I'm just saying. You know, I'm just saying. I'm going to go out the street and see if I see an oil well. If I see an oil well, I'll get right back to you. Listen, at the end of the day, everything that we just talked about, and these very smart two champions just talked about, is all true. Chris touched on it at the end. And that's the thing I'm going to talk about right now. The most important part is Turki Al-Sheikh loves boxing. Turki Al-Sheikh admires fighters. He likes fighters. He likes what he's doing. He feels good about what he's doing. As long as he continues to feel good about what he's doing, changing the sport, adding to the sport, you know, bringing fights together to make the fans happy, being involved in something that obviously he has a lot of admiration for, fighters. As long as that stays, then it will continue. When he no longer has that attitude, that love, that passion for it, if that ever happens, then it won't be there anymore.
It's about will it last, how long will it last? Also, we will discuss when we come back the consequences of having big fights in Saudi Arabia out of the travel plans of most Americans. We'll see how that works when we come back to Deep Waters. Welcome back to Deep Waters. Jimmy Smith, we are discussing here the consequences, the rewards of big fights in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, all over the Middle East, Dubai. My question is, for the panel here, is one of the problems with boxing in the 80s and 90s, it went from ABC's Wild World of Sports, I know I'm dating myself with that one, to a paywall, to Showtime, to HBO. Not everyone had access to it. In this case, when we talk about fights in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, it looks great on television. Most Americans aren't going to travel there. They're not going to have that live experience. We grew up, if not ourselves, raised by people who went to live fights and transmitted that love to us. Are we losing that, having these big fights almost exclusively outside of the United States, Paulie?
I mean, we've had them in the United States for a while, and we've been kind of losing out and becoming niche as it is. Plus, the pay-per-view model, it was used by the UFC, and it grew. So I don't know that the pay-per-view model is specifically to blame. I think it's making people pay for fights and then not putting the good ones on pay-per-view. So I think this is a really big deal in terms of bringing boxing a bit out of the niche more into mainstream. See, boxing fans are a little bit smarter in that than most other combat sports, and I'll tell you why. Because boxing fans got spoiled with all the fights being made in the 80s and 90s. Cross-promotional battles, they all got made, and all the fights you wanted to see got made. Then little by little, you had this TV alliance. ESPN has Top Rank. Amazon now has PBC. DAZN has Matchroom, and nobody crosses over. I mean, boxing fans don't want that. And I'm sorry I know I always say it. MMA fans are dumb enough to fall for it. Like, you call for the UFC, but you have one. You have PFL. You have other things. But you're okay with everybody staying in one promotion. We watch that in boxing as it is. PBC fighters fight PBC, yes, on Amazon. But top-ranked fighters fight top-ranked fighters on ESPN, and Matchroom fighters fight Matchroom fighters on DAZN. We need something more. We need it to spread around because we're smart enough to understand that's not the whole game.
I'm not going to go jump on a flight and go watch a fight right now. Right? That's just I don't really want to do that. I'm sure most Americans do that. But there is another option. Everything is right here. I can watch every fight, almost anything that's ever happened right here. And I can tune in at any time. There was not that many fights on TV. Now there's so many fights, so many ways to see your favorite fighters. So sure, there's a barrier to entry to actually going to the events if they're going to be over in Saudi. But the ability to watch them by more eyes and more people, more content is created, more eyes watching is good for the sport. Ultimately, it's actually, you got to weigh it out. It's like, all right, we're not going to have that experience of being able to go to the fights. But listen, we don't live in that world anymore. Especially after 2020, man. Things change. People don't want to go to things anymore. So I think having the option to be able to watch these fights, no matter where you are, I can be on a train, I can be on a plane, I can be sitting right here. I can watch a fight.
Listen, when Chris was just making that point, and it's the right point, it's a brilliant point, I was just thinking it wasn't that long ago that I had a flip phone and I couldn't watch the fights on my phone. And now I can too. I can watch it because my daughter actually talked me into getting one of those smartphones or whatever the hell you call them. So, yeah, that's the way of the future. That's not even the way of the future. That's the way of today. But I would just basically say one thing or ask one question to all of us. When's the last time in our sport that we had one baddest man on the planet, one unified heavyweight champion of the world, where anywhere you go, they'd know who it was instead of 5, 6, 7, 18 different names? When's the last time? It's been a long time. And we're about to get that again with Fury and Usyk coming up. I think it's May 18th over in Saudi Arabia. That is all you need to know that it's not a niche sport because it's emanating from Saudi Arabia, because that goes everywhere. That makes the whole sport worldwide. Not only when the heavyweights are known, everyone in the world is once again connected to boxing. You can go down the street and know who the heavyweight champion of the world is.
Well, that's what it's doing. That's why we're talking about. That's why we've had so much energy and enthusiasm on our show today. Join us for the next one. This has been Deep Waters.